the bank. My daughter-in-law smiled at the teller and said, "Her retirement checks go to us now." I looked at my son, hoping he would say, "Mom, that's not right." But he couldn't even look me in the eye. After 40 years of hard work for every Engel dollar, I had never felt so invisible. "The money goes to our account from now on," Vanessa said, beaming at the Chase Bank teller. My daughter-in-law leaned so far over the counter that her jacket brushed the glass partition. I stood right beside her, still clutching my freshly printed retirement paperwork. I had walked into that branch full of pride, holding the proof of my 40 years of hard work at the local bakery. Now, I suddenly felt like an extra in my own life. I looked over at Caleb, my son. He was staring down at his sneakers, completely avoiding my eyes, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets. Not a single word crossed his lips. Vanessa was already tapping away on her phone, handing the teller a form she had clearly prepared at home. It was a power of attorney document I had signed months ago for emergencies back when my severe knee pain made me terrified of ending up helpless in a hospital. Now, she was weaponizing that piece of paper to hijack my retirement funds. The teller looked up briefly, giving me a questioning glance, but Vanessa just kept talking right over her. She rambled on about rising utility bills, the grandkids, and how this would just make things easier for everyone. I felt a deep, freezing cold wash over me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just gripped my purse a little tighter and watched the scene play out with absolute precision. Caleb cleared his throat quickly, but all he managed to mutter was, "Mom, don't make this complicated. Vanessa's just handling things for us." In that exact moment, I realized my kindness over the last few years had been taken for weakness. They thought I was old, tired, and defenseless. They were dead wrong. I walked out of the bank in total silence, the heavy glass door clicking shut behind us. The wind whipped across my face as my fingers wrapped around the keyring in my pocket. Tomorrow, a new month would begin, and I was going to write my own rules. I sat at the kitchen table in my 2-bedroom apartment, sipping a cold cup of coffee. In front of me lay the red notebook where I had tracked every single dollar for years. Next to it was a mountain of receipts from Kroger and my latest electric bill. I started doing the math. Over the past 2 years, I hadn't just been paying for Caleb and Vanessa's weekly groceries. I had also been covering my granddaughter Chloe's daycare tuition. Every time Vanessa said, "Well, you're just home all day anyway. Can you run to the store?" I had dutifully pulled out my debit card. When I added up the final numbers, my heart sank. I had spent nearly my entire late husband's survivor benefits funding their lifestyle, all while Vanessa bragged about their brand new family SUV. Also sitting on the table was a yellow sticky note with the updated schedule for the number 12 bus. They expected me tomorrow at exactly 2 o'clock to pick up Chloe so Vanessa could go to her yoga class. It had been a slow, creeping process. First, it was small favors. Then it morphed into rigid obligations. Just last week, Caleb had dropped a printed vacation brochure for Hawaii onto my table. They wanted to go away for 6 weeks, and I was expected to house sit, water the garden, and sort the mail. Naturally, I'd have to pay for my own gas to drive out there. I snapped the red notebook shut with a sharp thud. I filed the receipts neatly into a binder. I didn't feel anger anymore, just absolute, crystal clear clarity. They didn't see me as a mother or a grandmother. They saw a free concierge service and a convenient ATM. My eyes drifted to the phone on the wall. It was time for the first move, and none of them would see it coming. At exactly 8 o'clock the next morning, I was standing outside the Wells Fargo branch, 3 blocks away from the Chase Bank. I wanted absolutely no connection to the place where Vanessa had humiliated me. The teller there was young and incredibly polite. I calmly explained that I wanted to open a completely private checking account, one that only I could access. No powers of attorney, no joint cards. 30 minutes later, I held the new account documents in my hands. Immediately after, I sat down on a park bench and wrote a formal letter to the Social Security Administration. I updated the direct deposit routing numbers for my retirement benefits with immediate effect. I dropped the envelope into the blue mailbox outside the post office myself. On the walk back, I stopped by a local cafe and bought myself a single slice of pecan pie, just for me. When I got home, I packed a small tote bag. I grabbed my old savings passbook, my birth certificate, and the spare key to my car. Then, I took a thick red marker and crossed out that afternoon on my kitchen wall calendar. The phone started ringing at 2:15. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. 5 minutes later, my cell phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Mom, where are you? Vanessa's waiting at the daycare. You need to pick up Chloe." I typed out a brief reply. "I have a private appointment today. You'll need to pick up Chloe yourselves." I silenced the phone and slipped it into a drawer. For the first time in months, a beautiful wave of peace filled the room. I sat back in my armchair and enjoyed my pie. The first domino had fallen, and my children's system was already starting to fracture. 3 days passed in total silence. On Friday afternoon, I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. There was no knock. The lock simply turned. Vanessa burst into the entryway, visibly stressed, her purse swinging wildly on her shoulder. "Mom, why haven't you been picking up your phone? And what is going on with your account?" she yelled before she even hit the living room. She was shaking a printout from Chase Bank in her hand. I stood at the kitchen sink, calmly washing out my teacup. "Good afternoon, Vanessa," I said evenly. She marched into the kitchen, slammed the paper onto the counter, and tapped it aggressively with her fingernail. "Your Social Security deposit is missing. The bank says the money was rerouted to a different account. Our auto loan payment just tried to clear. And now, the account is overdrawn." "What is this?" I dried my hands on a dish towel. "That is my money. Vanessa, I opened a new account," I replied, my voice steady and unbothered. Her eyes went wide. "But we talked about this. You live here so cheaply. You don't even need all that money. For family. You aren't supposed to count every little penny." I looked her dead in the eye. "We never discussed a thing. You made executive decisions about my life behind my back. I am not allowing that anymore." Vanessa let out a harsh scoff. "Caleb is going to be furious about this. You know how stressed we are right now. We completely budgeted around that amount." She spun on her heel and slammed my apartment door behind her. I walked over to the window and watched her stomp out to her car. She still didn't understand that this was only the beginning. If you found comfort or encouragement in the stories on Quiet Revenge, we'd simply like to say thank you. Our team works carefully on every story, while AI tools may assist with some parts of production. Each story is personally chosen, edited, reviewed, and prepared with care before it is shared. If you ever feel our work is worth supporting, we'd be grateful if you considered contributing the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon https://www.patreon.com .com/Quiet Revenge Family. Ko-fi https://ko-fi.com/The Story Family PayPal https://www.paypal.com/PayPal me/Kan Huang Min. Whether you choose to support us or simply continue watching, thank you for being part of Quiet Revenge. On Sunday evening, Caleb and Vanessa showed up at my door unannounced. Caleb looked incredibly uncomfortable, constantly shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Vanessa practically shoved him into my living room. "Mom, we need to have a serious talk," Caleb started, sitting on the edge of the sofa. "You're making things really difficult right now. Vanessa was just trying to streamline the finances. You forget things sometimes." "Mom, we were just trying to help you out." I sat across from them in my armchair. "I don't forget anything. Caleb, I've managed my money perfectly fine on my own since your father passed away," I said firmly. Vanessa cut in immediately. "Look, if you're going to withhold financial support, then we need to adjust the arrangement. We're going to need a permanent copy of your apartment key in case of emergencies. And we need to restructure the utility split, since we're using your basement storage unit for our winter tires." She slapped a handwritten document onto the coffee table. It was a blatant list of demands, disguised as family solidarity. I looked at the paper, then turned my gaze to my son. "Do you agree with this, Caleb?" I asked. He stared up at the ceiling. "You know how much prices are going up. Mom, can't you just react like a normal person for once?" I stood up, picked up the paper, and handed it right back to Vanessa. "No, I am not doing this anymore. My apartment stays my apartment, and my money stays my money. You are adults. Start managing your finances like adults," Vanessa snapped, jumping to her feet. "Fine, if that's how it's going to be. Don't expect to see the grandkids anytime soon. Let's see how much you like sitting here all by yourself." She grabbed Caleb by the arm and dragged him out. As the door clicked shut, I took a deep breath. They thought they could weaponize my granddaughter to break me. So first thing Monday morning, I put my plan into action. I called a local locksmith from around the block. Half an hour later, the technician arrived and replaced the deadbolt on my front door. The spare keys Vanessa possessed were now completely useless. I paid the bill in cash and slid the 3 brand new keys securely into my purse. Afterward, I walked down to the building's lobby board and double-checked the building maintenance schedule, making sure my apartment's trash valet and routine items were fully up to date. Once that was sorted, I grabbed my bag and took the express bus downtown. I walked into a travel agency and booked a week-long cruise down the Mississippi River for the following month, a trip I had dreamed about for years, but could never afford because there was always some sudden emergency my children needed cash for. In the town square, I ran into my old neighbor, Margaret, for the first time in months. We actually sat down together and grabbed a warm coffee in the sun. "My goodness, Nora, you look so vibrant today." She smiled. I told her all about my plans. No more daycare deadlines. No more grocery shopping for a household that wasn't mine. As we talked, I could literally feel the crushing weight of the last few years lifting off my shoulders. On the way home, I bought a fresh bunch of tulips from a street vendor for my kitchen table. When I unlocked my door, I noticed a note slipped into the mail slot. Vanessa had dropped off a grocery list for the upcoming weekend, acting as if nothing had happened. I took the paper, tore it into tiny pieces, and tossed it straight into the blue recycling bin in the courtyard. They were going to have to learn this lesson the hard way. On Thursday, exactly what I had anticipated finally happened. I was sitting comfortably in my armchair, reading a book, when a loud, violent rattling shook my front door. Someone was trying to aggressively force a key into the lock. It clicked and scraped repeatedly before the frantic pounding started. I stood up calmly, walked over to the door, and looked through the peephole. Vanessa was standing outside, with Chloe crying at her side because her mother was acting so hostile. I opened the door just a crack, keeping the security chain firmly engaged. "Nora, what is wrong with your lock? My key won't turn," Vanessa barked, her face red with frustration. "I had the locks changed." "Vanessa," I said, my voice low, quiet, and steady. "This is my home, and I prefer to know who is coming over before they arrive." Vanessa gestured wildly with her hands. "We need to drop Chloe off. I have a major hair appointment and Caleb has to work late. You're just sitting at home anyway. Stop being so dramatic." Chloe looked up at me with huge, tearful eyes. It broke my heart to see my granddaughter caught in the middle, but I knew I couldn't flinch. If I gave in now, nothing would ever change. "You should have called and asked me. Vanessa, I don't have time today. I'm busy packing my bags for a trip," I replied calmly. "A trip? What money are you using for a trip?" She practically screamed into the hallway. A neighbor from upstairs opened their door to peer down curiously. I looked Vanessa dead in the eye. "My own money. The money I earned over 40 years of hard labor. Have a wonderful day." I slowly closed the door and turned the deadbolt. Vanessa threw a few more muffled insults at the wood. But a moment later, I heard her heavy footsteps fading down the corridor. That same evening, my landline phone rang. It was Caleb. His voice sounded exhausted, almost pleading. "Mom, did you really have to do that? Vanessa is a total wreck. She had to cancel her appointment, and Chloe wouldn't stop crying. Why are you suddenly being so ruthless to us? We're your family." I took a deep breath, gripped the receiver tightly, and pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "Caleb, I am not being ruthless. I am setting boundaries that the two of you crossed a long time ago," I said evenly. "You tried to redirect my retirement funds at a bank counter without my consent. You've treated my home like a free daycare and me like an unpaid maid." The line went dead silent for several seconds. Then, he stammered. That was just because of the upfront car payment. "Vanessa thought it wouldn't be a big deal for you." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "That is your financial problem, Caleb, not mine. You overextended yourselves because you budgeted with money that doesn't belong to you. I've helped you for years, but that stunt at the bank was the final straw." Caleb tried one last angle. "But what about our trip to Hawaii? Who's going to watch the house and water the plants?" I gave a faint, sad smile. "You'll have to hire a house sitter or cancel the trip. I'll be traveling myself during those weeks. I am informing you of my schedule. Caleb, I am no longer negotiating." He let out a heavy sigh. "You've completely changed." "Mom." "No, Caleb. I just finally remembered who I was," I replied, gently placing the receiver back on the cradle. The red notebook sat closed on the counter. No more surprise expenses. I was finally the author of my own time again. On Saturday morning, I looked out my living room window and watched a flatbed tow truck pull up to the curb. The sleek, black SUV that Vanessa had proudly paraded around just 6 months ago was slowly being winched onto the back of the truck. Caleb stood on the sidewalk, His head hung low, signing a piece of paperwork handed to him by the recovery agent. Without my monthly financial cushion, they simply couldn't keep up with the steep leasing payments. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen. She was likely hiding inside, too ashamed to face the neighborhood. I didn't feel a shred of malice, only a profound validation of my choice. They had built their lifestyle on sand, my sand. Later that afternoon, I walked downstairs to take out the trash. Caleb was still standing by the curb, staring blankly at the empty parking space. When he caught sight of me, he walked over slowly. He looked smaller than usual. His shoulders slumped forward. "The car's gone," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. "Vanessa wants us to downsize to a cheaper apartment now. She says this is all your fault." I rolled the recycling bin neatly into its designated slot. "No, Caleb, this is the result of your own choices. You spent money that wasn't yours to spend. When you start budgeting like responsible adults, things like this don't happen." He looked up at me, and for the first time in weeks, he didn't look away. It was as if a light bulb had finally gone off in his head. "You're right, Mom. We took complete advantage of you." I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I love you, son, but I am done sacrificing my peace for your standard of living." And he nodded silently, turned around, and walked slowly back to his house. The storm had passed. It is a beautiful Tuesday morning. I am sitting on the patio of a small community garden plot I rented last week. A mug of fresh, hot coffee sits in front of me, and the crisp scent of damp earth and blooming flowers fills the air. My suitcase for the Mississippi cruise is already packed and sitting by my front door. My train leaves tomorrow morning. My phone buzzes briefly on the table. It's a text from Caleb. "Hey, Mom. I talked to Chloe. She wants to know if you can meet her at the park this Sunday after you get back from your trip. Just you and her. To get some ice cream. Vanessa's going to stay home." I smiled and instantly typed back, "I would absolutely love that. Caleb, I can't wait to see my girl. Just let me know the time. No demands, no unannounced drop-offs." The boundaries were set, and my relationship with my son was finally beginning to rebuild itself on a foundation of mutual respect. Vanessa kept her distance, which suited me perfectly. I finished my coffee and looked up at the clear blue sky. I had my life back. At 70 years old, I wasn't lonely, and I certainly wasn't helpless. I was independent, free, and completely self-sufficient. My retirement checks were landing safely in my new Wells Fargo account, and every single dollar belonged to me and my own dreams. I stood up, locked the small garden shed, and walked toward the transit station with a firm, confident stride. Life was beautiful again. All because I had found the courage to stand tall and say no. And that freedom was something no one would ever take away from me again. If you found comfort or encouragement in the stories on Quiet Revenge, we'd simply like to say thank you. Our team works carefully on every story. While AI tools may assist with some parts of production, each story is personally chosen, edited, reviewed, and prepared with care before it is shared. If you ever feel our work is worth supporting, we'd be grateful if you considered contributing the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family. co-fi/https//co-fi.com/ The Story Family, PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/PayPal me/Kan Huangmin. Whether you choose to support us or simply continue watching, thank you for being part of Quiet Revenge.